If you think Alocasias are only tiny little desk plants, you need to think again. Because these are giants of the jungle. They will outgrow my room, they will outgrow me, they will outgrow my entire house. So let me walk you through all of the biggest Alocasias that I own. So while known as the elephant ear plants, and whenever you think of Alocasias, you're thinking of those giant, sort of like jungle tropical plants, the reality is most are not that big. Actually, you're thinking of maybe 5 or 6 specific species that are able to get that big. And everything else that you find nowadays in outdoor sections are going to be mostly hybrids of this core species. While doing research for this video, I learned a couple of interesting things. Particularly that a couple of 100 years ago, you had some competing nurseries that were just trying to mix up and make it as confusing as possible to get the plant that you wanted.
But what I wanted to clarify right now is basically the main categories of terms that are used for giant alocasias and then what they actually mean. So the first one is going to be the giant taro. When someone says a giant taro, usually the correct thing that it's supposed to be is Alocasia macrorrhizos, which is one of the biggest ones and that is the most known around the world. Then you have one that they call the Borneo giant. Basically, the Borneo giant is a selected cultivar of macrorrhizos that was supposed to be kind of bigger. And then that is what made it be like the giant. But then the true giant that I consider to be the actual sort of biggest alocasia out there is Alocasia robusta. This is what I personally would consider to be the actual kind of Borneo giant, but to avoid it being confusing, we're just gonna call it Alocasia robusta, and every time you hear something that's not that is going to be macrorrhizos. This plant was described in the 60s. I think it was just obviously all around. People knew it. It was just never kind of described. And I think it's not as known because it is really difficult to keep in private collections or indoors. It just does not do well. It is really sensitive. So most of the giant alocasias that you think of outdoors that we now can purchase and we cannot trade, those are going to be related to mostly 4 main species. The first one might be that robusta, but those are very few in between. Most of them are going to be related or mixed in with macrorrhizos, the giant taro, the Borneo giant. And then you're going to have a couple other contenders. One of them is going to be Alocasia alba, which tends to be really green and also big. And the other one is just going to be Alocasia Odora.
So let's start easy. This is the giant taro. This is Alocasia macrorrhiza, and this is the Albo Variegated version. The main reason and how you will distinguish macrorrhiza after doing a lot of reading and trying to not be wrong is basically based on the sinus. So as you can see in this one, you see how the leaf kind of goes all the way to the middle of the sinus, and it doesn't really have that much kind of space or connective tissue in between the two of them. It has a very sharp sort of point when it connects to the petiole. So that is going to be one of the bigger characteristics whenever we're talking about macrorrhiza. So always look for that kind of like point in between to determine whether or not this is a macrorrhiza or an Odora. So this is the plant that gets massive, and this is what drives most of the hybrids that we encounter out there. This plant was given to me in a swap, and I was not really trying to get it because they get so big out there that I was like, this is just going to be a difficult plant. But it actually has been okay. It has kept somewhat a nice variegation. It did not just revert or go fully white and sort of difficult. And it has also been somewhat of a slower grower, but it did outgrow its container fairly quickly. I think this container is going to last a while, and I can see it already kind of pushing out some new babies on the side. So hopefully we'll find a nice little corm that maybe has like a really nice alba variegation. Up next is literally the reason why I had to go down this explanation on how most of the outdoor giant alocasias were made and based out of. Because this is Alocasia Dark Star, and let me tell you, it's hella messy because it is basically an Odora mixed with a black stem, mixed with a Borneo giant, mixed with a Bangiglo. You can see it up here. So basically, this is just a complex hybrid in which they take 2 plants, make a hybrid, and then they get a few babies, and then make another hybrid, and you basically just go down the generations on these plants until you end up with something like this. This is a beautiful plant, Dark Star. It does exist in a variegated version. It has one of the darkest like stems. It almost looks purple. And it's this deep stem. It goes all the way into the veins underneath the leaf. But on the front, it just creates this beautiful kind of green and glossy type of like shield. This has been a very easy plant. I got it from a friend and he basically just gave me like a tiny little corm because, you know, space-wise, I'm like, give me the smallest one you got. But this plant outgrew its little 2-inch net pot in like a week. And then I put it in here and it has just been pushing out and getting bigger. So this is definitely a grower, a fast grower. And as you can see, it has a very unique type of stem. So if you're interested in this sort of like dark stem, and then a green leaf, I would definitely recommend you checking out Alocasia Blackstar. And yeah, you can just ignore how complex the hybrid is. Like I mentioned, it does exist in a variegated version and it looks like this, which is absolutely beautiful. I think that would definitely be on my wish list. I don't see it as readily available. You mostly just have to find it of like one person that has it. It is not being like mass produced on TC, but it is really cool. So comment down below if you have Alocasia Darkstar, how big is yours? And have you seen the variegated version? Would you get it? This is Alocasia Dawn, and there's no way you're telling me that, wait, hold up. I don't want to like, let me think about my words because I'm not trying to get sued for defamation. So hold up. Okay, so legally, it has been patented that this is some kind of unique plant thingy by its growers. This is Alocasia Dawn, so I need to call it that because that is technically what it's patented as. But if you make me bet on this and you would make me put down money, I could almost put my money down that this is just a type of variegated Odora. So protect me from all legal liability, but I am just gonna give you my opinion that is not based on anything except my opinion. Do not sue me. I feel like this Dawn is literally just like a Odora variegated Albo that just has like a higher variegation and a much more stable kind. So it's like a stable variegated Odora. But it is definitely a big, fast grower. It already outgrew all the containers I put it in. As you can see, I got this literally not even a month ago. It outgrew the little one. It's already outgrowing this one. So we're in danger. I am going to let it get root bound a little bit more because I'm not trying to end up with a massive plant. But if I have to pick between this and the macrorrhiza, that macrorrhiza is like just pitching it because this has a much more tighter kind of clumpy. It has a much more strong variegation and it's honestly giving like a very similar fantasy. So that's Dawn in all of its patented glory. And this is Alocasia Odora Batik. It is also a little confusing out there with like terminology and stuff, but this is definitely like an Odora. So you can see the sinus. Sinus is also not touching, sort of like where it ends. It has that space in between. So we can reference the picture again. So this is Alocasia Odora Batik. You already saw it in my all variegated Alocasias video, this one. And you know that it's an easy plant. Not only is it an easy plant, it's an easy grower. It does really well on semi-hydro. It does really well on non-aroid mix. Non-soil aroid mix. And I think it just does well like straight up in dirt. This is definitely a big grower. It is a fast grower and it's a consistent grower. So I find Alocasia Batik, Odora Batik, to be one of the best plants if you are starting out with Alocasias and you want to get this kind of green, like mottled mojito life. I recommend this plant. This is easier than most. So there you have it, Dawn and Batik, both in all of their glory. Yeah, we'll see what happens with both of these. So I'm really excited to see how big they get, and I'm a little worried that they're gonna get a little out of hand. The next one is a hybrid that someone was like, wow, you complain about not having space for plants, and then you go and you buy the massive one. Yes, that's exactly me. And when it gets too big, I am gonna be in trouble and then give it away and maybe just get like a tiny little baby and start all over. That is my plan literally with everything because I enjoy growing them, but once you get too big, like I just cannot have you and you need to like bail. But I want this plant to last forever because it's so dark, it's so juicy. I just want this plant for every single Halloween plant video because, so good. So this is Alocasia Metalhead. Metalhead is a hybrid between Lauterbachia, which I do own, but I never show it. And then I also is a macrorrhiza plumbea. So both of them put together created this. This plant to me is the most dark underside leaf. Like this is the one that you will get to look like pitch black. You know, whenever those like girlies on the Instagram are kind of like trying to really flex on their dark leaf, so they just jack up like the coloration all the way down, so it's like super dark. Well, they always show two plants, and it's always going to be the Regal Shields because it looks pitch black on video, and then this one, which is Metalhead. But when you come down on real life, like non-filtered, I see it in person, this plant is black, like pitch black. I have, this is not as dark because it's indied, but if you give it a little bit more shade and you give it a little bit more of the right temperature, this thing goes fully black. Its petiole and stem and all that good stuff is not as dark as the Dark Star, but the underside turns pitch black, and then the front is gonna turn a dark green. So this is a massive plant. You can see how big it actually gets. And I totally recommend it just because it's fun. So if you have the space, or you just want to put it on a shelf, or you just want to have like a cool little corner plant, I think this is an option. It is not struggling with like room humidity, just like its fellow outdoor giant Alocasias. Yeah, this ones are just such strong growers. They're such aggressive growers, and if you put it in some semi-hydro, like this plant is just going to suck it all up. This is Alocasia Lukiwan, and the accident part is me owning it, because I have known that this plant gets big and it's a strong grower and it's an aggressive grower. So I never actually purchased it until I was putting in an order of like 5-6 Alocasias, and they just had it. And it was like 10 bucks. And I was like, fuck it, just add it. Like, add it to the bundle. At this point, we're already knee deep. What's one more? Well, the one more part that I should have considered was, what's one more that gets giant? This plant has been such an aggressive grower. I literally got it when it had this leaf. So it was tiny. It did not even look like an actual like Alocasia. It just looked like a generic baby is being born. And all of this has just been done in like a month-ish. And damn. So this is a hybrid between Alocasia alba and sinuata. That's one of the ones that I had mentioned earlier. Those deep green Alocasias, the alba one, sometimes is the parent for some of the hybrids, like this one. So I think this plant is getting the green and the aggressive growth and the resilience from the alba parent. And I think it's getting the texture and it's getting sort of like the thickness from the sinuata parent. And both of them put together, it creates a much more like unique experience, because this leaf is bright, it's fast, and it's not super thin. You can see how big this plant gets. I do not know if it has a variegated version, at least not one that I can have seen or remember seeing, but if I find one, I'll make sure to add it. And as a special bonus, I'm going to talk about my Alocasia Stingray. It is it is a type of macrorrhiza that has this mutation that makes it seem a lot more like a stingray. With it has a darker kind of petiole, and it has a kind of coloration that is a little bit unique to like Sabrina and stuff like that. And whenever a new leaf comes out, it always has the little tip kind of getting stuck. So I'm mentioning this plant because this plant gets massive, just like a lot of the other macrorrhizas. But something interesting with this plant is that it has this black sort of color. You see how the stem has that blackness? Sometimes it has these black streaks that go from the base all the way underneath the leaf. So that gives it this very unique kind of feel. But this plant gets huge, and I give it a shout out, and I mention it because out of all the other macrorrhizas, like this is so resilient. I have rotted this plant so many times, and then it just goes back into the knob, and I just like abuse it, and then I just throw it back with some perlite into the container, and then it just goes back to pushing a bunch of new roots and carrying on. So my cycle with this plant is, because I don't want it to get massive, it's going to fill in the entire reservoir with roots. It's going to get root bound. They're going to rot, and then the entire thing is going to crash. And then I go and remove all the roots that are rotted, and then I basically repot it. It goes through a bit of a freeze period, and then kind of like picks back up, and then we do it all over again. And that has been the process that we're doing for the past 2 years since I moved out of my house. And that's why I want to talk about what is the best care for giant Alocasias if you're growing them indoors. So first, do not be scared. That is the most important part. Just because you are buying a giant plant, it does not mean it's gonna get giant. And that is part of like its flavor and part of like the whole deal. Yes, these plants will get monstrous, giants if they're grown in the tropical jungle with perfect conditions and perfect water and all of that kind of stuff. In reality, in our home, it will never reach that size. It will get massive, right? But it will never just completely overtake or be able to be one for one compared to like one grown outdoor. I think a lot of these plants allow you to enjoy the plant, grow it, and eventually, get to a point where it just plateaus. It is not going to get bigger in size because it's not getting enough sunlight, it doesn't get enough nutrients. Most likely, its root ball or its root size is just not big enough to withhold those massive monsters. So that plant is probably going to flatline at a certain point in which the leaves are going to stop sizing up. They might put out some little ones, and then it's probably going to push out more corms, and it's just going to go into a different kind of experience, not just exponential growth. So I recommend you getting some of these outdoor giant Alocasias because they're fun. They're fun to grow. They're fun to experience. It's so much fun to get this huge leaf. And eventually you can just give it away to a friend. You can just collect a corm and, start all over. I personally think that you should buy your plants based on what brings you the most happiness. Don't buy it because it's expensive. Don't buy it because it's trendy. Buy it because you think it's fun and cool and you think it's going to make you happy. That is my key to success, whether it is with Alocasias or with any other of the plants. If it's not bringing you joy, get rid of it. And if it's bringing you joy, just keep at it. There you have it. Those are the biggest Alocasias that are owned. And YouTube thinks that this video is going to be the best one for you next.